Thank you. So good evening and welcome to the second of two community meetings being held for the residents of Tuxedo. Excuse me, I should say everybody who is not talking should be muted. Please unmute yourself only when you're talking. I hear something in the background. That's not in my house. Um, so this is the second of two meetings being held for the residents of Tuxedo by members of the Tuxedo Police Reform and Reinvention Committee or Collaborative, and we appreciate your being here. Last night we held an in-person meeting and received some interesting feedback. I'm Sue Scher, one of the collaborative members. And we will be presenting the first draft of our findings and recommendations. We hope to hear your thoughts about the police department. The other committee members, and I guess as I call your name, just you may have to say something because we don't see you all. Jana Deshay, Joan Roche Davis, Melvin Davis, Calvin Demond, Irene De Niro, Hallie Rubin Gaines, Gunul Comfoy, Sue Hayward, Gary Lee Haver, William Lemansky with an I,
Hello.
Michelle Lindsay, Ken McGar, Maria May, Father Richard Robin, Hank Salzer, and Meg Vaught. These members were charged with reviewing the Tuxedo Police Department in response to Governor Cuomo's Executive Order 203. I won't go into, I'm not going to go into what the executive order is all about, but the governor asked that every town with a police department review their police, review the department and review deployment strategies, policies, procedures with particular addressing the needs of the communities served by such police agency and promote engagement to foster trust, fairness, and legitimacy, and to address any racial bias and disproportionate policing of communities of color. Okay, so he asked that members of the community come together and evaluate the police and make a presentation first informing community members about their deliberations and their recommendations and involve the community members in those decisions, to hear their comments and to then make a final presentation to the town board, which would need to vote on ratifying a public law. Now, the town board would need to hold a public hearing reviewing the report, so that tonight would not be the last time for people to comment. So what we're going to do is each of 5 different groups will be reporting, as you said, rather than the full report that, or the material that people presented last night. Each group will present the purpose of their group and then their recommendations. And rather than hearing comments after each group, we will wait till each of the groups are finished, and then we can hear comments. If you want to remind yourself that you want to make a comment, a specific comment, and please enter it in chat. Just enter your name so that Maria can call on one of the 2 of you. Although last night we had comments by members of our group. Okay, so we're recording the meeting so that we have the material available for us to transcribe and to include the material in the report. So the collaborative work began in the winter of 2021, and since January, when Ken called a meeting to bring people together, a group of 17 people from all parts of Tuxedo, ages, races, occupations, have been meeting to, one, research the police department, two, um, develop, come up with conclusions, develop recommendations. We were working in 4 different subgroups. The material was then, when the groups reached their decisions, the material was put into a draft form that we then put online. So the 4 committees, the 5 groups you can see on here: the police department policies and procedures, community involvement, responding to injustice issues and inequities, crises involving mental health, substance abuse, and those with intellectual and physical delays, and then community engagement. So we'll start with the police department policies and procedures, and Bill Lemansky will present. What's with all the stuff on the bottom? Oh, it seems to be is it recording me? I see text on the bottom. Okay, go ahead, Bill.
How's my audio?
Fine.
Okay, good evening. My name is Bill Lemansky. Our subcommittee's assignment was to analyze the Tuxedo Police Department's policies, practices, staffing, recruitment, and training, and to offer recommendations for improving its operation. Our subcommittee included Michelle Lindsay, Meg Vaught, Hank Sauser, and myself. Our findings: a full-time 24/7 town police presence and dispatcher, as in the past, will provide a much higher degree of safety and security for the community. Improved mobile computer technology for patrol cars would be an asset. The current patrol car fleet is overworked. Some cars should be replaced. Body cameras would provide an added measure of safety for both officers and the public. The Tuxedo Police Department does not now have female officers. This diversity in staff would be advantageous. Our recommendations: a refinement of the police department's organizational chart and its maintenance, including a responsibility breakdown of all officer responsibilities, should be added. A number of administrative improvements and an editorial change to the general orders, in addition to the refinement of some existing general orders and the drafting of other needed new policies. Additional training for all officers should commence. And that's the extent of our findings and recommendations from our committee. Any questions, or are we going to reserve questions for the end? So
Maybe we could do questions now related to this particular topic.
Mr. Sullivan, and I trust Mrs. Sullivan, do you have any questions, comments, opinions?
The mic's on, okay.
Yeah,
Your comment about of 24/7 increasing safety, is there a need for the increased safety? Do we have more incidents at night? What's the statistics that would drive that?
Well, as you may recall, in past years, we did have 24/7 coverage. Now we have, I think, I had it in a report, 4 part-time and 6 full-time officers, including in that is a part-time chief. So at nighttime, we do not have town police coverage, but rather we have coverage such as it is, I guess, by the New York State Police. So any event that was any occurrence at night, the 911 number would have to be called, and they would direct the state police to respond. Now, the state police probably, I would guess, as well as the county 911 for that matter, have a very vague understanding of the road network and the community itself. Just from a standpoint of response, our own police would be advantageous.
But my question is more so, what's the need for the response? What's the statistics on night calls that require a response?
Well, I don't have those available to answer that question.
Okay,
Anything else?
and
Yeah, I just think that would be helpful, Mr. Lemansky, just to give a flavor for why we would need to add additional officers, which obviously are increased costs, you know?
Well, our feeling is, as it is now, with relying on the state police and the county 911, that's somewhat inferior to having our own police department. I mean, if you're going to say for X hours during the night, there is no local police coverage, you could carry that argument probably into saying, well, why do we have a police department at all?
Mm-hmm.
That's my opinion on it at any rate.
And
Well,
last night, if I may add, last night when the officers were here, one of the things we found out was that when there are calls overnight, unless there needed to be follow-up, they're not even counted in our blotter at all in our calls. So they don't get any feedback at all from state police. They have to go in, the police officers in Tuxedo have to go into a server and see, oh, this is what happened over the night. And then if there needs to be follow-up, then they will do it. But otherwise, those calls aren't even recorded as needing police assistance.
Yeah, that's a good point. In fact, considering that, I guess it wouldn't be very easy for us to compile statistics, not having any history of what the state police may have been doing at night, if at all.
Yeah, this is Gary. This is Gary Hebner. Can I make a comment?
Certainly.
Yeah. I think the resulting recommendation was less based on statistics because the statistics are very difficult to get. It was more based on our research and the feedback from the community that they want the police to interact with the community and know the community. And from midnight to 8 a.m., the police coverage from the state police does not know the community. So that's where the concern came from. And for me personally, I don't expect to have a fire in my house between midnight and 8 a.m. But if my local fire department were to say, we close from midnight to 8 a.m., but the firehouse twice as far will come if your house is on fire, would make me very unsettled. Thanks.
And some of the results from the survey indicated that people did not know and therefore did not trust the state police. The state police have indicated that the response time, the local police, that the response time of the state police was really problematic. So those were some of the other reasons why we said that. Somebody needs to be muted.
If I may, if anybody's familiar with how the Troop F covers their whole area, and sometimes at night they have one or two police officers to cover the entire area. Troop F is several counties. So if you happen to be on one of those nights when they have a skeleton crew of state troopers, you're going to wait a long time before someone responds. So we've always relied on having our own. Not a lot of things happen, but I can tell you on my way to work at 2:00 this morning, 2 or 3 people were speeding through town and were pulled over by the local officer. I can tell you that my experience, since they think there's no police coverage, Route 17 at 2:00 in the morning is a raceway. And that's a danger to everybody who lives here.
Yeah, we've known in the past that Route 17 is a pretty active thoroughfare for drugs going from the city and point south up north to Middletown, Newburgh. Uh, in that it's off of the New York Thruway. Even in the past, I had learned tractor trailer drivers would quite often come up 17 to avoid the thruway. So it's a busy thoroughfare for shady activity, I hate to say, in some instances. So as you mentioned, Calvin, during the night shift when there's no one available, the response time in an emergency from the state police could be very lengthy.
In the chat, Carolyn Kelly asked, will New York State pay for body cameras? And Holly answered, so maybe we should wait till she gives the response. And Ken said the chief informed me that there were about 130 plus A-line between 11 p.m. and 7 p.m. covered last year. So over 130 incidents.
Those are shifts
Shifts, sorry.
of the nights. The A line is from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m.
Right. So there's some night coverage, but it's not every single night.
Does anybody else have a question or another question? Okay, we'll move on.
I could just point out to you that I'm working with the chief. We have 3 different bids for body cams, and we'll be working with the town board to make that happen. And we have interviews scheduled for next Wednesday for adding an additional full-time police officer.
So
And one of the candidates is a female.
one of the questions was who pays for those body cams? Does the town pay for the body cams, or is this a grant that we're going to get from somebody?
I know of no grant at this point. I mean, Holly was looking at one through the DA's office that was, from what I remember, it was pretty small. It wouldn't outfit our officers, but we have enough money to get the body cam.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on. No one else has a question. The community involvement and community engagement committee are doing 2 separate presentations. An important component of the executive order was for members to be extensively involved, and that the committee felt one of the possible ways to get the opinions of people during COVID time was to create a survey. And we utilized Microsoft Forms to create a 24-question survey. 118 people responded. The survey was posted on the town website. What you see in front of you is a flyer that was written in English and Spanish. The survey was written in English and Spanish. People were told to click into the town website, or they could use a smartphone and use the QR code to get to the town website. There were 14 recommendations that the committee had. But basically, the majority of the survey respondents felt that the Tuxedo Police Department is respected for its professionalism and daytime responsiveness. We did not find residents identifying current overt racist or discriminatory behavior, but some responses do indicate some rude, intimidating, and following behavior of some individual officers. Several of the complaints related to disrespecting women. The most frequent concerns are related to the lack of Tuxedo Police Office coverage at night and the local 911 dispatcher. People indicated they wanted to call a dispatcher who knew the town that they were calling about. They do not believe this current countywide dispatchers understand where places are in Tuxedo, what they're talking about, and therefore people are hesitant to call the dispatcher's office. They don't have a relationship with the state police that provide coverage and don't trust them in the way they trust the departmental staff. And I think, Brian and Pat and Lynn, you'll find each of the four work groups have recommendations from their own perspective related to why 24-hour. People don't know much about the police department. So our recommendations included expand service to 24-hour coverage by the Tuxedo Police Department, recognizing that there is a fiscal issue that we need to pay attention to, and to have a local dispatcher. Felt we needed to develop some form of accountability for the department where that is accessible to residents to file complaints and report inappropriate behavior. We needed to provide more transparency by providing information about the police department functioning on the police pages on the town website. And this should include descriptive information, weekly data about police law enforcement and non-law enforcement activities, with also an increase for social media presence. Right now, the website for the police department on the town website is basically empty. And there is a very old individual department website, which they don't use anymore. But if somebody puts those words in, they'll find it and find very old information. Residents should be publicly informed about why decisions are made about the size of the department and coverage. And those are things that both the police department and the town board needs to pay attention to. The police department needs to develop local training for officers. They do send officers for training to state and county programs, but we feel that there are issues specific to working here that needs to have local training, which should include diversity training, particularly related to interactions with women, seems to be warranted. And then people felt that there needed to be increasing patrols along Route 17, particularly in the hamlet where people are concerned about speeding. So those are our, any questions?
Just a quick question, Sue, on the
Yes.
dispatchers, on the, whatever you want to call it, repopulating the dispatchers role. Are we talking 24/7 dispatchers or just dispatchers at night?
We weren't very specific at this point. I think that needs to be researched, but people are finding they call, even when they're calling the dispatchers during the day or certainly at night, the dispatchers don't know the area. We hardly know the area. So the dispatchers send people, tell people to call Rockland, they tell them to call all sorts of places, not knowing where we're at. So the system's not working for people, and people feel like when they call, they get a runaround. And so they stop calling. I don't know if that answers, but it.
Yeah,
it needs-
I'm just
needs
more
to be-
thinking because we have our regular officers during the day and evening, and they do know the town. I understand the
but
point about the overnight shift,
you can't call the police station.
I understand that, but if you call Orange County 911 and they call John Norton's going to know where to go.
If they call John Norton, or if they send people to other places before they send them to Tuxedo, has been some of the problems that people have. So certainly evening when none of the officers are on is a
Mhm.
problem, but people are finding it a problem overall. But what we decide to do, will really depend on exploring things further.
Yeah, no,
And
I'm just trying to
yeah,
understand what was explored in the
yeah,
process, that's all.
people weren't totally specific. They were saying, if the system doesn't work for us right now.
Sue,
And,
Sue, this is, Sue,
even if something happens in town and you're down the block, which I have, I saw an accident and I was, a half a mile away from the police station, and it was daytime, and I drove up and, there was nobody there. And when I pressed the buttons, I got Goshen. It's like, why am I doing this? Uh, so,
Sue, this is Gary Hebner. My committee
okay,
also came to my committee, which hasn't reported yet tonight, also came to the same conclusion about having dispatchers 24/7. And to be clear, one of the reasons was, as I spoke before, for the overnight coverage of officers, is the community wants to feel connected and understand, or have the people they're speaking to understand not just the roads, but the community and everything else. If I call 911 right now and I say something's happening at the powerhouse, the person in Middletown is going to be like, well, what are you talking about? And having spent hours and hours watching 911 centers in action when a true emergency is happening, that familiarity with not just the geography, but the area of coverage is of utmost importance. Thank you.
thank you. Other thoughts?
No, I'm good, so.
Okay, next. Is that Hallie and Gary?
Yes, but Hallie's covering.
Go ahead.
If you want, Gary, I can do a brief intro, and depending on your situation, because I know you're driving, if,
No, I'm still driving, so it's easy to pay attention, but I'd rather not to present unless there's a question.
okay. So if, I'll make it shorter this time, and if there's something that you can leave off, and particularly the stuff that you researched, if you want to just come in, if I can finish up. If you don't,
Got it.
if you want, if you're comfortable with the driving situation.
Yes.
All right. So I was part of Gary and I were part of the focus group for responding to injustice issues and inequities for colored immigrants, disabled, marginalized communities. That was Gary Hebner, myself, Father Richard James Robin, Sue Haywood, John Uteshe, Maria May, and also Melvin and John Roche David participated in our committee. We met sometimes in person and with general meetings, and communicated outside of our meetings. Some of the findings include that we understood that we're in the process of applying for accreditation for the first time. I'm not misstating, but I understand it's the first time, and it's been in the process for approximately 2 years. The other thing that's been mentioned several times, and thanks for Sue for focusing on this, the website, which is something I will rely on, that needs to be updated. It's very outdated. If you Google it, the first thing you get is very unusual information about hot topics, baiting like theft and scams and fish and red fishing. Really not helpful information. Another finding is we don't have body worn cams, but in English has addressed that, so that's happening. The other finding is specifically concerning my research into the Tuxedo Park Police. They obtained funding for 2 free body-worn cams from the Orange County DA's office. Like I mentioned in the chat, seems like funding is kind of on a temporary hold, but it should be coming back within the next couple of months, hopefully. But I know that they did get some freebies. I don't know if it's the quality of the cameras that may be an issue, or just because we have to wait too long, maybe that's too much of a problem. But that money should be available again soon, hopefully. Another finding was about Narcan, so only some officers carry the Narcan. Also about trainings, since most trainings were canceled during COVID, a lot hasn't happened during a time where we really need it. During this really difficult time, and where it's been out more out in open discussion in social media about George Floyd and the new legislation. Trainings need to be more frequent. Chief Abbott indicated that officers receive training on tasers 1 time per year. Trainings in Goshen for implicit bias training 1 day. De-escalation training 1 day. Other findings that our officers use non-lethal pepper spray, tasers, as well as firearms. Other finding is the traffic tickets do not include race. For anyone who did not realize, like myself, it's really just when there's an arrest. I guess my own naive way, I thought that it should be addressed, and that's something that I included in my own conclusions, that race should be addressed when people are stopped, whether that's for traffic violation or otherwise. So that we can help to a recommendation better understand racial profiling and the effects of that. Another finding we have is that concerning a female officer, and that I learned that the department is only allowed to select the top 3 qualified candidates off the civil service list. So I had a problem with that, but Gary helped to explain that to me better. So in recommendations, hopefully we can find loopholes, way to get around this kind of civil service list to not only recruit women, but women of color to work with our community. And also Spanish-speaking officers. So I'm dealing with residents who don't speak English fluently. I'll go through very quickly just a couple of recommendations. Accreditation with the policies that we're including shall not be conclusive, but we should determine what's actually being implemented in order to receive accreditation. So residents, maybe we can, at some point, to help expedite this process, maybe residents can work one-on-one to review the policies that are going to be accredited and match up so the accreditation can happen quickly. There's some important standards that accreditation requires for internal affairs, for health of persons in custody, and use of force. So they have very specific requirements that perhaps maybe what's causing delay is that our requirements and our rules and regulations maybe are too evasive to, and this is just a speculation, but accreditation is pretty strict, and if there's not any kind of details matching what they're looking for, then the process is going to take longer to accredit our recommendation also very important to incorporate a principle of George Floyd justice for police. Specifically, work to end racial and religious profiling, banning chokeholds and no-knock warrants, requiring body cams, covering communities, improving transparency by collecting data on police misconduct, use of force. And then in the end, I'll just say, additional training, not just 2 or 3 trainings a year, specifically on race relations and implicit bias, it should be more frequent. And then working with a couple of agencies like NYCLU and NAACP, and Fearless. So, Gary, you wanted to address, or I also have the issues that maybe you included if you want me to say it, if it's hard to I know you have a few minutes.
I'm having a little trouble hearing, but I think you covered everything. Unless if there's questions, we can help. We can answer any questions.
Gary did include, I didn't mention, there was policing strategies, Gary, that you're familiar with, based on racism and discrimination and marginalized group include different policies, which I had to learn about more, broken windows policing, stop and frisk. We know about informal shooting at motor vehicles, and then using community policing strategic plans. That's in our report.
Yeah, it's all laid out in more detail in the report.
Mhm. Okay, yeah. Like I said, I have to take some time and read it. I have not done that yet, so I don't have any questions right now.
Lynn or Pat, any questions?
No, I'm good.
Okay, we're ready to move on to the next group. Gunal will report on hers. Thank you, Hallie.
Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Ginal Camfoy, and I am just the presenter for work group number 4. And a part of our work group is Ken Magar, Irene Denaro, myself, and Susan Scher. I would like to just quickly state that we had researched many articles. We looked at the survey of what the community did want. We looked at many articles, and we interviewed police officers. We interviewed many of the crisis management authorities that are run in Orange County. We also attended many of the meetings that are local meetings, Orange County and Newburgh also. We watched Zoom meetings from other municipalities, even around the United States. So we got a feeling of nationally what was going on, and as well as locally. So our record focused on crises involving officers' responses to mental health issues, substance abuse crises, suicides, and individuals with intellectual or developmental delays, and also family disturbances. So I just have this really quick quote. I just want to say 1/4 of fatal police shootings involve people with mental illness. And that statement cannot be understated. I think that was very crucial that it was the crux of us formulating this work group, just to take a look at what Tuxedo Police Department and how they actually respond to these type of crises. So that's what our work group conducted. So our findings are, our recommendations are: continue to use mobile response team of Orange County for crises that do involve mental health, substance abuse, and individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. We found that the Tuxedo Police Department, while they do have utilized the mobile response team in the past, that all of the data we did look at, it was very limited. So one of the recommendations is to increase the use, as well as training on when to have assistance from a social worker or somebody to come and assist in a mental health crisis that they would be called upon. The next recommendation would be for the Tuxedo Police Department to receive crisis intervention training, to be knowledgeable about local and community programs or resources to help those individuals. For example, it would be programs to help themselves, to help the individuals, or to give a phone number for the individuals to actually call upon so that they can go and receive assistance for. I apologize, my son is about to enter screen. Tyler, I'm sorry, go inside, okay? I love you. Thank you. Sorry about that. Another finding is that each Tuxedo police officer receive officer wellness training annually. And we felt this was very important given the heightened amount of increased amounts of mental health incidences that have occurred nationally as well as locally here in Tuxedo. We reviewed statistics, data statistics, arrest statistics for as much as we can get our hands on for Tuxedo, and we did find that it was increased. 36% of all of the data that we looked at did involve the crises that I had mentioned earlier. So we thought that was significant. And you know, the Tuxedo, the officers are people as well. I think that if everybody has increased, everybody in this world has an increase in stress, increase in having to deal with their life and their job, so do the officers. And that comes into play. I think that in the advent of these wonderful meetings that we have online, we have plenty of training, and I think that we should utilize them. We actually listed free training provided by Orange County, free training provided by many other programs. And I'm hoping that they will definitely be utilized, especially if it's free. So the last one I want to mention today, the last recommendation, is to receive annual training on current and applicable laws for the police department, different drug trends that are going on, something to be aware of, and also different drug concealment tactics on how drugs are concealed in the, say, most likely in an automobile. So these were our recommendations, and I would like to thank you all. Please, if you have any questions.
No, thank you. I think these are all things in this day and age, I think we're all familiar with, you know, that we all as a society are kind of muddling our way through, sometimes more successfully than others.
Completely agreed.
Pat and Lynn?
I'm good.
Yeah, I'll answer that. We have shared our report with the police. Well, first we shared the survey responses, and because as we were all doing our research and the police knew that the survey was out there, they were really interested in knowing, so that as soon as we finished the survey response, we sent it to the chief. And then one day in talking to one of the officers, I realized he hadn't shared it with the officers, so I just sent it to one of the officers to send it out to people. So we know that they had the report, because last night Officer Russell, Sergeant Russell, I guess, was sitting in the audience with the document in his hand and making reference to things in the document while he was asking us questions. So they have received it. I know there were people who were worried when we first did this, saying, oh my God, the police are going to be upset with you for doing this. What we found, an amazing cooperation with the police. Every one of the subgroups had a meeting with at least one of the police officers. And we found they really want to talk. And they did a lot of talking to us about what they were doing and what their thoughts were. So they've seen them. We haven't heard an official report from them about it, but it just came out last week. So. Comments, questions?
Yeah, I just like to make a comment relative to the police officers. Last night, I was appreciative because they corrected a couple of errors we had in our report, as we didn't know a couple of things that had occurred over time. So they corrected us and updated it. I appreciated that.
The one thing that I learned last night related to accreditation is that it seems there's one officer, one of the full-time officers, whose job it is to provide service around town. He's the one who is working on all those issues, on doing all the different parts of the accreditation. So we don't have a person, they don't have a secretary, we don't have a person who's dedicated to working on getting all these policies and procedures written out in a way that the accreditation board wants to hear that. So if we want to see accreditation moving, we need to think about some kind of support to them to get accreditation moving faster.
Yeah, I was interested to learn last night that the cameras that used to be in the patrol cars for a number of years no longer exist. So the cars have no cameras in them any longer. And they were a valuable addition to the cameras, to the cars rather, years ago. And I'm living here in Tuxedo 40 years, and I didn't know we had females on the police department in the past. So they corrected me on that. I had never seen a female cop in Tuxedo. So that was interesting to learn. However, currently we don't have any females.
Right.
So they educated me on both those counts, which I appreciated.
So, this is Pat. My question's more general. So we've done this report now and you have findings. So what is the next step?
Well, I'll tell you the next step, but we have one more person who has to report.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, I thought we were.
No, we have one more. How about we wait till Maria reports and then we'll tell you the next
Yeah,
steps.
That's
Okay.
fine. Sorry. You
Go
jumped
ahead,
in.
Maria.
Hi, so my report is on community engagement. So we also asked questions. So community engagement relates to the extent to which the police department is involved in the town in non-law enforcement activities. So we collected this information from the chief, from the officers themselves, and also from the survey. So what we found was that folks in town really enjoyed many of the activities that the police was involved in a non-police way. School events, family community events, things like the gym programs, the programs for teaching kids self-defense, also family events like the fingerprint program or fishing derby or the family fun day, like this. And so the attendance to this meeting was not only an asset in terms of safety, but also it got people comfortable with getting to know the officers and officers getting to know families and so on. So based on our responses, we found that people enjoy the non-law enforcement interactions with police officers. They are aware of that, that plays a large role in community policing and folks being comfortable with seeking help when they need it. And they also wish to know more about the police. They feel like the Facebook page and their page in the Tuxedo website is not up to date. And during our interview with Lieutenant Norton, he said that they were trying to learn how to input information, and this is something that we plan to do. The other area in which people talked about was the need to have citizens more involved in decisions of the police. So things like citizen advisory committees or civilian review board or something like that was something that so people talked about in the survey. There were two recommendations. One was to expand the community engagement activities to make the officers more visible to the citizenry. This, of course, decreased due to the smaller force, and also due to COVID-19, and more transparency in policing decisions, including from the town board. Like what are the decisions that are made in terms of personnel numbers and things like that. And people felt that, as the overseeing agency, that the town board needs to be more transparent with people regarding the need to add, take away, whatever, in the police department. And that was it. The more transparency in, community events and engagement, those were the two. Any questions?
No, I'm okay. I'm good. Pat, you got anything?
When you were talking about more engagement with the community, yes, they did Family Fun Day. They're out for, like you said, the fingerprinting at school events. But beyond that, what were you thinking? You know, coffee with a cop? And I don't mean that as a joke. We do that at work, coffee with our executives.
Mhm.
So what were we thinking to enhance community engagement?
So one of the things that they talked about was the fact that there are certain police officers that have affinities to certain communities. Like, for example, Officer Hall feels really comfortable working with the young people. Other officers feel more comfortable working with the elderly, things like that. So so one of the things that, one of the recommendation was to build on the skill and interests of individual officers to develop more specific liaison roles to different constituency of the community. So that was one. And second, as hopefully little by little our, COVID restrictions are lifted, then there are more chances for community events to happen. And also maybe how little by little our police force increases, there'll be more opportunities for the officers to have, non-policing kinds of community involvement. That answer your question?
Yeah, people talked about things like having visits to the police department,
Yeah.
or ride along, or ride along with the cops. They liked that idea last night, of running more programs about, be it about, they used to do a prom night, preparation for prom night and driving, scams, discussions with the elderly, discussions with parents about drugs. So there's a whole range of different kinds of things that people can do, that the police department can do with the community, or they can share those sessions with the library or school, Chamber of Commerce, and in participating with residents. We live in a small town for a reason, and people want to interact with their police.
Maria, specifically, one thing about the self-defense, I haven't heard that our town did this before, which I think would be great for teens and young people in situations to need to defend themselves, like young kids, like if someone ever approaches them, how they can defend, how they can react, or teenagers, how to defend themselves. I would really be interested in doing that for our young people, and I don't know if that was done before. I hope that can be done if it hasn't. And then the other thing is about drinking and driving. I think when they get closer to driving age, like maybe there could be something for like 15-year-olds in town, like just kind of, reminding them about the laws and what they have to do and what they shouldn't be doing. Maybe that's.
Yeah.
Okay, shall we move on? So where do we go from here? We had decided on two meetings, an in-person meeting and a virtual meeting. And so tonight is the second of the meetings. We will take the comments and questions that were raised in both meetings, and look at our content in our draft report and look at our recommendations and see if committee members want to make any changes in what they've written or the way they've written the recommendations. And make those changes. We will also probably have a list of all the comments and recommendations from the citizens as part of the full report and present that report to the town board. This is per the executive order. The town board will then have a public hearing because the town board will need to vote on a on approving or accepting the report from the committee. In terms of specifics as to decisions that the town board makes, that then needs to be town board discussions, hopefully utilizing our data and our recommendations to make those decisions. I mean, I think at this point, there seems to be, some things happening already. It's been known for a while that the people in the town wanted to see more police coverage. And we see now that the town and the police department is working on that. So each of our different recommendations will have to be dealt with in a different kind of way by the town board. But at this point, at the point that we turn in our final report, this committee's time is over. It's then up to the town to determine how we're going to have citizens continue to be involved with decisions made about the police. Does that seem to state it from everybody's perspective? Anything I left out? Ken, is that your understanding? We present the report to you and you guys have to have a public hearing and then vote on it and send it off to the governor's office.
Yeah, I think you made an important point. We'd be accepting the report and filing that with the state. And then it's up to the town board to work with citizens to implement some of the suggestions. And obviously will be a rollout of many of these great suggestions. And as you pointed out, Sue, some of them are already taking action. Like I said, we're interviewing next Wednesday for a 7th police officer. And we do have 2 qualified, we drew from the resident list. So these 2 candidates actually live in Tuxedo. So that addresses some of your concerns about local knowledge and potential for engagement in the community. Obviously, if people live here, they're part of the community already, not just by occupation, but because they're residents.
But I guess at this point, there is no citizenry input into that decision. Who gets hired?
No, there's no citizenry input, no. Other than the vote, obviously, that's, you vote for people that hopefully carry out what the citizens want to see happen. I mean, there's a procedure of civil service hiring. The whole interview process is pretty scripted. And I shared that with town board members today. And so they'll be able to see exactly from the, let me see what I have here. I got to get another folder.
But I guess I'm asking that at the point that we had a board of commissioners, they were involved in, as citizens, they were involved in decisions. It's possible that with a liaison board, they might be, but right now we don't have anything like that for citizens to be involved in the decisions.
Right now, no.
Well, okay. I guess I'm trying to make the point for why people were saying that they wanted more citizen participation. This is a good example of how citizens might have been able to be involved in decisions about who got hired.
Well, I look forward to this presentation to the town board. I'm obviously a resident first and appreciate the work that this committee has done.
Yep.
And I'm not here this evening to respond to the presentation directly, other than as a resident mostly. But there was a few things that I thought were appropriate to share that we're working on as a town board.
It seems that there's another question. Claudia has a question asking who pays for the New York State police coverage during the A shift? Does the town?
The town does not pay for it.
Town, okay. Does that answer your question, Claudia?
The citizens of the state of New York who pay state taxes.
We all pay.
I was
We
gonna
don't
say,
pay
I think
ultimately,
it's
but
okay.
Okay, ultimately, that's the answer.
Right.
Right.
Any other questions?
I
Any other
I
comments?
just want to make one comment, Sue. Thank you guys for working on this. I know it's been a process and it's taken a lot of your time. And just as a taxpayer and a resident, I appreciate all of your efforts that went into this. So thank you.
Thank you. So one other thing, if there are further comments that you want to make, we've opened an email address for people to send written comments to, tuxedopolicereform@gmail.com. That way you can have be more expansive in some of the comments you have,
Okay.
or say things you haven't said before.
So I just want to answer one other comment that Claudia put down. No, Claudia, we are not charged back by the state for the police coverage.
We do pay county taxes. We do pay
Mm-hmm.
into, by our sales taxes, everything, the taxes that we pay, some amount of that goes for the county and for the state.
But there is no direct billing.
No direct billing, right, no direct billing.
It seems odd that that is not a budget item and they don't recover their costs, but that just seems odd to me, I guess.
Any other questions? Any other comments? Well, I thank the audience for being here. I thank the committee for all their work. I thank Claudia and Ingrid McGar and Karen Dower for their technical and artistic technology, and all of you for your participation. And have a good evening and stay healthy.
Thank you, guys.
Good night. Bye.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.
So I made a copy, I transcribed, I copied all of the comments on a document, so I'm gonna send that to you.
Great. Okay. Have a good evening, everybody. And to the committee, we're gonna have to have some kind of meeting to decide what to do with all the comments and how we want to put together the final